Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Stories That Inspire Us / the author series. As you all know, I want to welcome first and foremost my guest who really traveled to be on this podcast today. As many of you know, so many people are still without power, and she showed up today, and I'm so blessed and grateful. So thank you so much, Yvonne, for taking that extra step. And of course, to your amazing friends that are helping you out with this. So without further ado, I want to welcome Yvonne Caputo. She is the author of Dying with Dad, and this is her second book, which we're going to chat about, but we're also going to chat about her first book as well. Welcome to the Stories That Inspire Us podcast. I'm so excited that you are here with me today.
I'm so excited to be here as well.
Wonderful. So I want to preface this by saying this may be, we have those tough conversations throughout our lives. And when you are having that conversation with loved ones who are probably in the dying process, it's always good to have those conversations. And I love the title. I'm going to show the book again because I think it's a beautiful cover. Dying with Dad, Tough Talks for Easier Endings. And Paul Malley, who is the president of Aging with Dignity, and I thought that this was so apropos, boom, on the front of your book. A gift of care for those we love the most. I sometimes don't know where to begin, but I'm going to start by saying that left a very profound imprint on my heart, because those are very tough conversations to have. And when we don't want to have them, when we know we should have them, we kind of put ourselves in that emotional turmoil. So first, I'd like to ask, obviously, I kind of know from reading your book. I haven't read the whole book, but I have been reading it. What inspired you to write this book?
I was very lucky that my final full-time job was in a retirement community. And we had a nursing wing. And on that nursing wing was a resident who was end stages of dementia. And she developed an abscess on her foot. And the doctors were recommending hot water baths and antibiotics. Her daughter, who was her healthcare agent, said, Mom doesn't want anything that unless it's going to improve her quality of life. And her quality of life isn't where it needs to be now. So the daughter wanted to deny those treatments. The problem is that the mother moved to Pennsylvania, and quality of life is not a part of an advance directive in our state. So this case ended up being in court. And the court said that there would be a surrogate that would allow for the hot water baths and the antibiotics. And should it come to that didn't work and there was going to need to be an amputation, then the daughter could then step in. So I'm thinking about my elderly father and knowing that we had nothing in place. Ooh. So I called him on the phone and told him that one of the things that we needed to do was to do an advance directive. So we found an attorney and we did that. However, fast forward several years, I became aware of a document called the 5 Wishes. And that document took the advance directive that my father had already done in a direction that was profound, because not only did it assign a healthcare agent, it also talked about all the medical things that Dad might want and not want. But it focused on things like, how did Dad want to be remembered? How comfortable did he want it to be? What kinds of things did he want his children to know? All of this, what I would say, with heart. So when I read that document through, I just said to myself, I have to do this with Dad. I just have to do this. Now, I can tell your audience, there was a lot of trepidation.
Oh, sure.
Dad lived 6.5 hours away from me on the other side of Pennsylvania. So the whole drive, I was stewing, how am I going to broach this? What do I say? My dad was often, what the hell do you want to do that for? I mean, that would be the kind of reaction I get from him. But walking into his hospital room, and he was in the hospital again, he was a brittle diabetic. And something just happened in the air. It shifted, it changed. I said to him, there's something I want to go over with you, and it's more about this advanced directive stuff. Is that okay? He said, sure. He shifted his legs over the edge of the bed, patted the seat beside me and said, come sit down.
Wow.
So I know. So there on those tray tables, I set the document out, and it's so well written that all I had to do was go from item to item to item to item. And in the end, I found 2 witnesses at the hospital. Dad signed in front of witnesses. The document was complete. And 3 years later, I had to put his wishes into action.
And obviously that whole process is very difficult. That goes without saying. But I think you were met with, and I'm sure that you have gratitude for that time that you had with him to express your concerns, that you really wanted to respect his concerns and his wishes. So I am assuming that he felt at ease, like it wasn't what you wanted for yourself, it was what you wanted for your loved one, your father.
Dad and I weren't close. And so I'll refer to the first book, which is called Flying with Dad. And through the writing of that, it became the glue between Dad and I. I received the father I always wanted, and Dad got a daughter that he didn't know he had, just for the virtue of me listening and transcribing his World War II stories. So that shifted our relationship. So I had that in place. And once the 5 wishes were done, our relationship shifted again. And in 2009, at Christmas time, my husband and I and his brother went home to see Dad because Dad was in the hospital again. And we left, and he was doing fairly well. And the social worker said, when can we send him home? And I said, well, when he's ready. So we drive across the state. That very night, the phone rings, and it's my father, and he's livid. They'd sent him home. He was screaming at me on the phone because they sent him home with no medication, and he was in incredible pain. And so I had to repeat to Dad, I said to send you home when you were ready, but it doesn't sound like you're ready. And he said, his voice softened, and he said, honey, can you come home? I'm scared.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, I can't tonight, but I will be home. I'll drive home first thing in the morning, and I'll find somebody to come stay with you so you're not alone. And I was able to do that. So I arrived home at Dad's home about 4:30 in the afternoon. And 2.5 hours later, he was gone.
Oh.
And what happened was we heard a thump. Friends were over from across the street. Dad was on the floor between the dresser and the bed. I'm not professional. I didn't know, so we called 911. The EMTs arrived, and we were able to get Dad out into a space where they could work on him. But I knew this wasn't what he wanted. So I called the hospital and I said, there's a do not resuscitate order on Dad's chart. Please get it to the emergency room because they're bringing him in. The blessed emergency room doctor called the EMTs no more than a minute later, and said, you can stop working on him. So I laid down beside him. I whispered in his ear that I loved him. I told him that I knew he was going where he wanted to be, which was with my mother. And then the glue in our family was the Lord's Prayer. So I said the Lord's Prayer in his ear, and he was gone. Oh. Now, as sad as that seems, my father had said over and over again, I want to go out of my house feet first. So the EMTs put him on a gurney, and that's exactly how he left. He left out of his own home feet first. And it was winter, and in northwestern Pennsylvania, the snow is coming down 1 inch an hour. And I'm standing beside the gurney near the ambulance, and there's this light on my dad's face. And it was this soft, sweet smile. And with that, I knew that it had happened the way he wanted to. And as strange as it sounds, I'm standing beside the ambulance going, yes. And the EMTs are looking at me like, I'd lost my head. And I said to them, you gave Dad his wish. He wanted to leave his home in the way he left his home. You gave him his wish. So I call all of this in the book the divine paradox, having to do something really tough to end up having something really special happen. So in a sense, I don't grieve the loss of my father the way I have grieved the loss of others. And that doesn't mean that I don't miss him, because I do. I would have him back in a heartbeat. There are so many more questions that I have for him. There's so much more I want to know. That closeness to him happened late in my life, and there's a part of me that feels cheated, that we didn't get more. However, the other side of it is the gift that I gave him by doing the 5 wishes with him is the gift he gave me. I mean, for all of us, what would it be like if we knew that our parents, our loved ones, our siblings went the way that they wanted to because we sat down and had those conversations with them?
Wow, Yvonne, that is so emotionally powerful. And it obviously brought me back to a time when my dad passed about a little over 2 years ago. And of course, we had everything, all the advanced directives, whatnot, everything done about 15 years prior to that. And when he moved to Connecticut, of course, we updated everything, make sure we were under the statute guidelines for the state of Connecticut. That was still very hard. I remember sitting in the attorney's office, and I said to my dad, if you want, we can go outside so that you can, have your conversation alone with the attorney. And he's like, no, I want my children here. And there was three of his 6 children there. But I look back to that point and then where we were when he went through the process of, when he passed away, and everything was to the T, exactly the way he wanted it. Was it tough on us? Yes, there were certain parts of all that process that were very tough, but I remember him saying something very specific to me, and I will never forget this conversation. We're driving home, and the doctor gave him a very grim outlook. And he had mentioned to, get hospice going and all that kind of thing. And my dad completely understood. He's like, I don't want anything else. They had a great conversation. And my dad put his hand on my hand as we're driving home. And I looked over at him and he said, I want a party. And I knew what he wanted. He wanted to have this conversation, but I wanted to pause for a moment and reflect. And I looked over at him and I said, then we shall have our party. I said, what do you want? Well, I want to have, everybody's got to be there. And, we've got to go, you have to go to this restaurant and I want it at this restaurant. And then I want a big party at the house afterward. And I'm like, okay. So we got those last little details. Like I will remember that conversation. And as you mentioned, as sad as it was, the day my dad passed away, I felt a calmness after I got over the initial shock of when he passed. And I thought, wow, he went exactly the way he wanted to. And, thank you so much for sharing that, because those are the tough conversations to have. They are.
I began the book by talking about a phrase that we often hear. I first heard it when I started in psychotherapy, the elephant in the room. Everybody, there's an elephant in the room and we see it and we could walk under its belly and the trunk is swinging and all that kind of stuff, but everybody's sitting around the room as if it's not there. And the statement is, none of us is going to get out of here alive. However, we're so afraid to talk about it. So something that's happened after the publication of the book in two different directions. An elderly person who read it said, oh, I need to have these conversations with my children. He ordered the 5 wishes, filled it out on his birthday, because his children live in various different places. He said, for my birthday, I want a Zoom and I want my children to be there and I want to discuss the 5 wishes. And that's what his birthday party was all about. Now, he wanted to be cremated, and they said, well, where do you want your ashes to be disposed of? And he said, oh, toss them over the bridge. I don't care. Now, here's a man who had grown up on this little farm, and they said, Dad, don't you want us to take your ashes back to the farm? Oh, no, I don't want to put you guys out. I don't want to be any trouble. And they said, this wouldn't be trouble. This would be something that would make us really feel good if we could do that. So he said, okay, I'll update my 5 wishes. The second anecdotal that came to me was this much younger female who read the book. And she said every time her parents had tried to bring up the issue of death and dying, her response was, no, I don't want to talk about that.
Ah.
And so in reading the book, it totally changed her perspective. She then purchased the 5 wishes for her parents and for herself. So that's the passion that I have about the book, is that those who read it will, not necessarily the 5 wishes, although I love that document, we'll see an attorney, we'll do the kinds of things that need to be done so that when the end comes, children know what to do, or loved ones know what to do. One of the examples for me personally is Dad was Roman Catholic. Okay, so knew that he wanted a high mass. We're sitting with Father Gramata, And it's my brother and sister and I. And my brother said, gee, Father, you know, I don't know what the Mass is all about. You know, tell us what we need to do. And I said, but I know. I said, Dad wanted a high Mass. He wanted my husband to sing. My husband has a glorious tenor voice. He wanted the Lord's Prayer, the Ave Maria, and Saving Grace. And because I had been taking voice lessons, he said, and you will sing too. He said, whatever readings you or the grandkids would like to do, go ahead. Whatever your favorite readings are, I don't care. He said, however, you know that thing when people stand up and talk about you at the service? I don't want that. Because if they haven't said nice things to my face, then I don't want to hear it at the funeral.
Wow. Very profound.
Yes, very profound. So those were the kinds of things that were settled. He had some kind of a savings plan. The entire funeral was taken care of financially.
Yeah,
so a lot of the things that then become problematic for kids, it was done, but it was done because we were open to having the conversations.
Right. And it's so good that, you know, when you hear these different stories, they are definitely so relatable. And I want to kind of segue a second, and I just want to welcome and acknowledge all of our amazing listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. I see so many familiar names. You are also awesome. So thank you so much for being here. Yvonne, when I can remember initially having that conversation with my dad about 25 years ago. And we said, I don't know how it came about, but we said, Dad, you know, did you update your will? It came up in conversation. He's like, no, I really got to do that. And it was probably a month or two in the making until I finally said to him, Dad, you know, you have 6 children with 6 different opinions, 6 different ideas. And he said, you know what? I really need to get all my stuff in order. And I was like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So everything, of course, got, you know, updated. And like I said, when he came, moved to Connecticut, we updated everything again. But I love how you were describing how you had different readers reach out to you, the elderly gentleman who, for his birthday, I mean, think about that. That's such a gift to give your children, and vice versa, for them to not feel maybe that initial shock and awe that, you know, oh God, Dad wants to talk about his dying wishes or what he wants done. But when you look back on all that, the ease and simplicity of having those conversations is really almost beautiful and very poignant.
One of the things I learned working in a retirement community from the residents was how our staff sometimes dealt with things like that. It would be frequently that a resident might say to a staff member, I just want to go. I just want to go. And staff would say, oh, please don't say that. We want you around. We love you so much. And what that did is it shut the conversation off. So because of my position, I was in charge of doing some training for the staff. And so I would always talk about, please don't do that. Please, if you can, say, tell me more. I want to hear your story. Because when I did that with residents, what I would hear is something like this: Yvonne, I'm tired. My friends have passed away. My husband is no longer here. I'm not doing the things that I want to do. I don't feel like I have a purpose anymore. I'm just so ready to go. And that was such a gift for them to have somebody who would just acknowledge that that was what was on their mind. So I was really graced by having the opportunity, to sit and listen to folks who needed to talk about it as a way of helping me to be prepared to have that conversation with my folks. Now, my mother did say that to me. My mother was in the beginning stages of dementia, and she knew it. She knew she wasn't remembering. And she was also in a lot of pain from osteoarthritis. So we were sitting in the family room, and she got very still. And she said the same thing to me. She said, Yvonne, I want to go. Mm. And I said, tell me. And she said, I hurt all the time. I can't go out and tend my flowers. I'm not volunteering anymore. I just want to go. So knowing my mother and her beliefs, I said, I think I understand. I will miss you like crazy, but talk to God. Talk to God. And between the two of you, you decide when it's time. And then because of the dementia, in a flash, our conversation was gone, and she brought it up again. So as many times as she brought it up, I just stayed with her and repeated those same kinds of things. And Janice, gratefully, in a month, she was gone.
Oh my God.
However, she died alone in the hospital. And this is before I knew, what we could have done to perhaps have prevented that.
Wow. That was one thing, excuse me, that my dad said to me. He says, I don't want to go to a hospital. Like, you think back to all those conversations, and I think initially it may be uncomfortable, especially if you've never had that type of a conversation. But we keep on going back to the 5 wishes. And I think that is beautiful, because it makes me look back at Paul's statement, a gift of care for those we love the most. And although it's tough, the caring and the love that you're giving, you're not just hearing what they are saying. You want to tune in and listen with intent and respect.
The 5 wishes is legal in 42 states. Mm-hmm. The paper version of it, the pamphlet version of it, it's like 8.5 by 11, is $5. And going to 5wishes.org is the way that you can find it. And they also have booklets that you can purchase on how to bring up the conversation, what to think about, what kind of a mood to set. But when you're sitting down with the document itself, it is so well laid out that the question will be there. What type of life support do you want or not want? The question is right there. And then there are spaces below the question that additional things can be said. I'll give you an example. My 5 wishes are done. And I did them online. And you can do that, and they will save it for a year. So if you change your mind about something, or if you need to update it. So I'm going to have to look at the date that's on mine and see if it's time to update. But I was really specific with my children about some things. I don't want them taking care of me. If I should get to the point where my health is so poor that I need to be cared for, I want them to find me a good home. And I specifically stated how to go about that. Having worked in a not-for-profit, faith-based facility, I know what absolutely phenomenal care can look like. And so I said things like that, you know, in the 5 wishes document, there was something that I didn't agree with. It said, you know, if you're in the room with the person and they're non-responsive, keep it upbeat, you know, tell stories, tell family stories. And in my document, I said, this is a sad thing. So if you need to cry, cry. Know that in some way I'm with you and holding you, but cry. And then I also said, if I've ever done anything to hurt you, let me know what it is. If you've ever done anything that you feel sorry about, let me know what it is. And know that by your telling me this, that we can be at peace with it, is my wish. So I extended some of the things in the 5 wishes specifically because they're things that are important to me.
And that is so very important, because it's those meaningful discussions of letting your loved ones know exactly what you want and not pulling it out of you, so to speak. And I think that's a great way for maybe the person that has signed or will be signing the 5 wishes or looking into it, to start to have those meaningful discussions. And it kind of takes the stress and the fear away.
Yeah, it does.
Wow. Are you working on book number 3?
I have some ideas, but I haven't started.
Wow.
I haven't started.
Wow. Dying with Dad, talks for easier endings. Wow. Welcome again to all my amazing listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. We have time, if it's okay with you, Yvonne. We'd like to welcome, we have time for one guest to come up on stage. If you want to ask Yvonne a question or maybe join in the conversation, share briefly your experience on what those conversations have been like for you. And we'll give that just a moment, of course. Yvonne, how can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
If they Google my name and Ingenium Books, INGENIUM Books, that will take you to my author page. Okay. And the author page talks about both books. It also gives an email address. And my email address is really pretty simple and straightforward. It's Yvonne at YvonneCaputo.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You know, these heartfelt conversations, and, you know, it also brings up something else for me too. I have a very dear friend who has a very rare and terminal illness called MSA. And actually yesterday was MSA Awareness Day, which I wasn't aware of. But in any event, you know, having a friend that has a terminal condition, for her to be able to share with me and talk about her feelings and what that means to her, that is probably the best gift that you could ever give to a loved one, whether it's a family member or a friend. Yvonne, this has been such an amazing chat with you. And I so appreciate your heartfelt and raw and authentic conversation, you know, talking about your book, talking about your experience and how your book have inspired others to have that conversation. I want to thank you so much for being here today, and hope that, of course, you will definitely consider coming back.
I'd love to. I'd love to. It's a great way for me to tell your audience too that the first book, Flying with Dad, was in essence how I connected with my father in a way that I really, really wanted to connect. And also to say that sometimes we get so caught up in whatever the topic is that we get afraid. And all we really need to do is listen.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit back and let folks say what it is. And maybe even to say, well, tell me more about that. And then sit back and listen. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to make it go away. In the listening of it is where we give the biggest gift.
That is so true. And on that note, I'm going to do my closeout on the Wisdom Audio app. Again, I want to thank all my amazing listeners. And of course, all of Yvonne's contact information will be in the show notes. And at some point on the Truly Your VA website, you'll see the blog post from today's Stories That Inspire Us podcast with Yvonne. And check out her book, have those tough conversations. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Truly, I was inspired by this amazing conversation. Listen with your heart, walk over your fear, and have that conversation. Yes, it's a tough one, but certainly needs to be done. Thank you so much, Wisdom. And thank you so much for being here. And if you have a story to share, it's that important. That means somebody needs to hear it. Bye for now. Hey, everyone else. I want to thank everyone again for being here today. These are the tough conversations that we need to have with our loved ones. And of course, our extended family and friends. So important. How will you have that conversation? Let us know what you thought of today's podcast and reach out to Yvonne for more information. And obviously you can purchase those books through INGENIUM books, and all of her author information is there. Wow. Today, I was truly inspired by this conversation. Thank you again, Yvonne, for being here. And remember, those stories that we need to share are that important. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, I was inspired by this amazing lady, Yvonne Caputo. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.